What's going on, guys? This is Mr. Teach at 66 Movie Reviews. I am Mr. Teach. Why am I acting like an ape? Well, it's all in preparation for today's movie review, 2017's Kong, Skull Island. Now, I saw this movie in the theaters and just recently purchased it on Blu-ray the other day, and I must say, this is a pretty solid monster movie. It's not anything mind-blowing. You know, if you don't like monster movies, there's nothing here that's going to change your mind or, make you love it. But if you are, this is a pretty solid movie. The plot is kind of the same. It's not exactly the same as the original King Kong films that came before. John Goodman plays a member of Monarch, the agency which, investigates giant monsters. He was in the 2014 Godzilla. And this movie takes place in the 70s, long before Godzilla, although I guess Godzilla is still, roaming around. They give subtle hints in the movie, which is kind of fun. And they begun, I guess in the 70s, they started, satellite, or, mapping the Earth. And they find Skull Island, which is hidden in like a thing of fog or something, and lightning storms. Anyway, Skull Island's there, so they have to go and they get a military escort and a couple other people. Tom Hiddleston is a tracker, Brie Larson is a photographer they take along, and they all go and, investigate the island, and awesomeness ensues. The acting is good. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say what the biggest flaw of this movie is. Some of the characters are kind of stick figures. They only have one or two defining traits about them. There's a bunch of soldiers. I forget the actors' names. Honestly, I forget the characters' names, too, but it doesn't really matter. And they're kind of generic and dull, but really, what do you expect? It's a monster movie. No one goes to these movies for, brilliant acting and everything, so the two characters with the most depth, or the most interesting, are without a doubt John C. Reilly, who plays a World War II pilot who crash-landed on Skull Island back in the 40s and has been living there ever since. He is hysterical. I mean, he plays the same character every time, John C. Reilly, but he's just so damn funny and so endearing that, he's probably my favorite human character of the entire film. And the other interesting character is Packard, played by the great Samuel L. Jackson. Again, it's not really that well written of a character, but it's frickin' Sam Jackson. He just, he swears, he barks orders. He is the man, and he becomes obsessed with Kong because in the first action sequence, Kong kills a lot of his fellow soldiers, and he wants revenge. But let's get to the meat of the matter: the monsters, and in particular, King Kong, and it is pretty freaking awesome. I mean, the design is definitely influenced by the 1933 Kong, which I love. I love the original Kong. I love old school monster movies like that, And they really put him through the ringer. He gets beat up, he gets bloody. I mean, he gets singed at one point, and you're like, damn, that is one tough son of a bitch. He's still coming back from that. The first action sequence where they go into the clouds, to come to Skull Island. There's a lot of lightning and wind, and it's very well done. The director Jordan, I forget his last name, does a good job with the action sequences. They're kind of they're quick cut, but they're not incoherent. So that was great. The first action sequence with Kong is awesome. When he comes up, and backlit by the sun is pretty freaking awesome. Apocalypse Now references all over this film. It makes a big deal about the Vietnam War because it takes place in 1973. But it never feels too out of place. So that was great. I love how the first action sequence starts. I'm just gonna head and spoil the whole thing. I'm sorry, but it's been out for a while. But they're just flying their helicopter. All of a sudden, they look up, and a freaking tree just comes in, smashes the helicopter. I mean, it's just so quick. There's no build-up. It's just like, holy shit! There's a freaking giant gorilla, and it is pretty awesome. There's also another monster called, was it Skull Crusher? Skull Crusher. I can't remember the name of the monster, but there's basically these other monsters which live underneath the ground, and they come up. Their children come up, and Kong is basically the only thing stopping these monsters from taking over the entire island. So, of course, there's a big one, because there has to be a mother, and of course they save that for the end of the film, but that final battle is awesome. It is absolutely worth it. You feel every punch, every kick, Kong uses a propeller blade at one point. On paper that sounds like that could be too much, but in the actual film it is just freaking awesome. I loved it. Loved it. The other characters are pretty generic. Brie Larson is a photographer, and man, she's pretty. But other than that, not really much of a character there. Tom Hiddleston is there, and he's kind of likable, but we don't really learn much about him. They're functional. They're functional characters. They do what they have to, and I wasn't sitting there going, okay, when's the next monster? Come on. I was engaged enough by them without necessarily, start crying when some of them start dying. Which, by the way, this movie is surprisingly violent for a PG-13 movie. I mean, Kong crushes several humans in this movie. I mean, yeah, you don't see any blood, but the director does a great job of, selling the force of it. Ooh, they're dead. They ain't coming back. There's also islanders on the movie in the movie, or natives, I should say, and they don't really play that big a part in the movie. They're just, you almost wonder why they're there. I mean, their makeup is kind of cool, but I was just sort of like, I don't really know if they really need to be there, but they were fine. What else? I said the action was great. Just a fun, cheesy, stupid monster movie. I did like Godzilla slightly more. But, Godzilla's my favorite monster of all time, so that's probably going to bring it, going to have a point to play. But overall, yeah, this movie's a blast. I can't wait to see him fight King or Godzilla. That is going to be awesome. I mean, he's supposed to be 300 feet tall in this movie? Although, at one point, John C. Reilly says that he's still growing, so this movie takes place in the 70s, so by the time it reaches today, he'll be huge. So, overall, I would give this movie probably a 7.8. It's pretty solid. If you don't like monster movies, there's nothing here that's going to change your mind. But if you're like me and you just love monster movies, it was a solid, fun ride. So that is all for this week for Mr. TH66's Movie Reviews. I will see you next time.